Hi there, welcome to Closing Tag. My name's Aaron. This is video 3 in a series on coding out an API so that the front end of our application can talk to the back end. In previous videos, we have just gotten familiar with the project structure. We set up a simple route to see how that works. We also set up MongoDB on our machine with a database that we added some data to. And in this video, we are going to set up our front end to receive that data from a structured route, which we're also going to code in this video. And that'll be the very beginning of a structured API for our application. So let's get into that. Here we are within the project. We're going to jump into the front end, but remember, you can grab this repository from the description. It's linked below. It's public. Jump over to the branch for this episode, API tutorial video 3, and you can code along. But we're going to head into our front end, into our source directory under components. Our home page has this scrolling message, but we want to add some components that are going to display that data that we added to our Mongo database just below that. And what those components are is just listed here. We have projects and Git project. So the projects will house all of the Git projects, and these will just be mapped within the projects component. What the project will look like, an individual project, sorry, so this would be a Git project. We'll have a title and a URL. That's the only data we've added so far to the database. Eventually, we're going to add some third-party data that comes from another API. For GitHub stats, that'll be a GitHub API call. But for now, we're just going to do these two, and we're going to put them just here. So let's have a look at what those components up here look like. Projects.tsx is basically just a container for those individual projects within. So it has this children's prop that will get populated with each individual project. And so we just have an interface here in our TypeScript that's telling this component to be on the lookout for React nodes specifically. And then within project components, we have this git project.tsx, and this is what the individual project will look like. Here we see it has this same title and URL as a string. So that's the interface we're working with. Eventually, we will have commits and last commit date coming from that third-party API. And all we are doing is just mapping this data that comes in as props, and we're going to put it to some JSX. So the title ends up going in the project info section, and then we have this link, which will get populated with the URL that comes from that data that comes through the props here as well. So we're going to head to the homepage, and this is where most of the work will happen. And what we need to do is we need to get that data within this homepage. So we're going to have a constant variable for that, and it'll be const. It'll be an array where we have all of the projects living in an array, and then we'll have a means of setting that array up with some data, and that will just be a React use state. We will do the type here is going to be type project. It's going to be an array of those because we are going to map those each as an individual child to the projects container, and we'll just instantiate it as an empty array. And what we want to do here is we want to maybe not use React, but instead we can add use state as a module that we are importing from React, and then we don't have to specify React here. We can just use state like so. Now to call set projects, we need to have use effect as a hook as well. So we have that already imported here. And what we would normally do here is we'd call this from the API, but we are not going to do that because we don't have this set up yet in our backend. Instead, we're going to populate it with just some dummy data for now. So use effect will go ahead and set projects, and we're going to set it up to be an array of these JSON objects. Whoops, I just did some reformatting there and it jumped me to the bottom of the page. And each one of these will have a title. Sorry, that title needs to be in string format. And the title for this one will be API tutorial. I believe this is the data that we have in our backend. And then we'll do URL, which is what each project has. And we'll do just blah.com for now. Whoops. These will eventually all link to github.com actually. So let's just do that instead. And we'll copy that object out a couple of times, ensuring to put commas after each one. And then this title could be closing tag website, also at github.com. And then we'll do mining game, I believe was the third piece that we had there, also at GitHub. Okay, so that's what we have so far. Why don't we make these actual links, in fact, just to see that they work essentially when we click them. So we'll put that here and we'll put that here. Now here's our dummy data. It's being set up. What we need to do is we actually need to make sure this triggers when the page loads. So that's by including an empty array at the end of useEffect. And then down here, we can start to build our components with that data. So what we want to do first is have that projects container. So projects will be a component like this. And then afterward, we'll have a closing tag. The reason we have a closing tag is because this has child props. So what we'll do then is we will map all of our projects. So within here, we'll say projects, which is an array, so we can call the map function. And we can supply the project itself, as well as the index, which we'll use as a key to our map. And we will supply those here. And then we will just have the component for a single Git project, which is Git project, where the key is the index, the title is the project.title, and the URL is the project.url. And when we do this, sorry, I just filled that in with autofill. But when we do this, we should now see on our web page that these are populating with that dummy data that we supplied. And then finally, what we're going to do is we are just going to spin up our server. So change directory to the front end if you're not already there, and run npm run dev. Mine is running at this local host. And sure enough, here's our projects. We have the title showing up within each of those components, and they're all mapped to these three here. And we can click these links just to visit github.com for now, because that's what we have there. But essentially, we have our front end ready for some data from the back end. Before we get into coding the API for our backend, we want to make sure we understand how we want to go about doing that. We are going to follow some REST principles in this video, so making sure that our routes are resource-based, so not verbs, but nouns. We want to make sure also that we are standardizing our HTTP methods as well as our response codes, and our format will be JSON for the responses. Here in the back end of our project, we want to start up MongoDB, the database that we configured last video. So we will change directories to the backend. And if you remember, there is a script within our package.json, start Mongo. So we'll run npm run start Mongo, and that'll fire up our Mongo database with the config that we coded. And then we'll switch terminals just so we have it available for when we start up our main server, and we'll head over to our app script. Our app is set up with a single route right now, just this route that returns a welcome message to the front end. But we want to include the API routes that we are wanting to work on with this new data that we've included in the database. So we're going to add a new folder to our source directory called models. And within models, we're going to add a file for a Git project data model. So what we're going to do is we're going to import Mongoose as well as schema and document from Mongoose. And then we're going to create an interface. So export interface, and this is just so TypeScript can know what to expect with this data model. So it's going to extend document because it includes all of a document's attributes, but then it's also going to have a title as a string, and it's going to have, and then also a URL as a string. And what we're going to do is we're going to just make a Git project schema now that looks like this. It inherits from schema, and it'll be a new schema. We're going to have to include the type here, which is a Git project schema. And it's going to look like this, where we have the title, and within there, the type of the title is string capitalized. It is a required attribute, and we're going to trim it as well so that we don't have any white space living in our database. And we'll include now as well type equal to string, and I believe that should be capitalized. Of course, you want to have a comma to delimit these, and then we're going to put required as true, and we'll put trim to true as well. And then what we want to do here is, because we already have the data within our database, we want to let Mongoose know where that data is going to be stored. So I'm just going to move these curly braces up into our method. I'll reformat that. There we go. And then after the set of curly braces, we're going to include just another one here and put collection. And I believe we called our collection repos. So that's where this data is going to come from. And now Mongoose will know about that. So we'll export our Git project as a Mongoose model. Of course, that model is based on the interface for a Git project that we just wrote. And this is where we could also include the collection. So we'll put it here as well. It'll be repos, and we'll do Git project schema as the schema that we're including. Now we can write our routes for Git projects. So under our routes folder, we'll include a new file for Git projects, and we can import Express within this file, as well as these other exports. We'll want request, response, and we will want router from Express. And we'll also want to import our model. So we'll import, I believe it's called Git project from up a level, and then within models and Git project, but I think we capitalize this for some reason. And then our router of type router is going to be equal to a new router. We'll just instantiate that. And then what we'll do here is we'll have our router with a get HTTP method. And at just the main route, we're going to get all of our Git projects. So we got a request and a response, each of their own type. And we're going to pipe those to a method here where we try to get our projects. So projects equals await. And when we include our Git projects like this, this probably should have been plural. This will go ahead and find all of our Git projects based on what we supplied for the schema, as well as where to look in collections. And then what we can do is send those projects back as JSON in the response. Our response will also have a status code of 200, which is an OK status code. And then we will catch any errors here. And what we'll do is we will just console log the error. And just say error, fetching projects, so we know what's going on. And we'll include the error. And we'll also return a status code 500, which just tells the front end that there was an internal server error. And then finally, we'll just export our default router. So let's go ahead and import those routes here. So we'll import what we'll call Git projects router from routes Git projects, which we just wrote. And then this router we will use in our app at a specific route. So app.use, and the route that we'll do for now will be /API Git, and it's kebab case for REST APIs generally. And then we'll put that router, so Git projects router, like so. Eventually we will move this API prefix into its own file so that we can manage elements of the API all within one file. But for now, we're only grabbing the Git projects, so that's what we'll do. Just a quick note here, I had to jump back into my git projects.ts file, and where I import Git project, I had to enclose it in curly braces because it's not a default export. Just a note, you may have to do the same. And then we are ready now that our Mongo server is still running. Yep, we're still running here. In our backend, we can run npm run dev, which will start our server. We'll open another terminal for our front end eventually. But now that this server is spun up in the backend, we are ready to. All right, now that our server is started in the backend, we are ready to jump over to our front end and receive this data from our newly coded route. So here in the home page of our front end, we want to now fill out this use effect no longer with the dummy data that we had previously, but instead with the data that's coming from our backend from our Mongo database. So we're going to import Axios to begin so that we can use some standard HTTP methods. And the one we're going to use specifically is get. And within our use effect, we will set up just a asynchronous function like so, asynchronous function. And we're going to have a try catch block within our asynchronous function where we are trying for a response from an Axios get. The type here will be a project array, and the route, we're going to use backticks because it's going to be our backend route. So here we're going to change API because I believe it's called backend URL. And then the route is API/API/Git projects. And what we'll do then is we will set our projects based on the data returned from that request. So we'll go response.data, and that should function, but we will catch any errors with our catch block. Here is the error, and we'll just console the error. Sorry, I believe it's supposed to be lowercase, and just the error. And then what we'll do is we'll call this function. So get projects. And that just triggers once on page load. Let's go ahead and run our npm run dev script here in the front end. And at this local host, we can now see whether it is functional. There we go. It looks like we have our data coming from the backend. We know it's coming from the backend because when we click these links, they no longer go to the generic GitHub website, but instead to the specific repo based on which one. So we are officially receiving data from our backend. So in this video, we set up our front end to receive some structured data from our backend. Initially, that data was just dummy data, but we eventually went into the backend. We built out some models and schemas as well as routes that grab that data from Mongo and put it to our front end. In the future, we will add some complexity, some layers. We will have not just a route for getting all of our projects, but instead an individual project. And at the individual project level, we'll have some more detailed data, which will come from a third-party API. So be on the lookout for that in the future, and thanks for watching.